Hi, this is Phyllis. Welcome back again to my channel. Today's project is going to be this floral cluster bracelet that I have made using my Swarovski crystals. If you like what you see, stick around for the materials list and I will teach you how to make this bracelet. Thanks again for all of my new subscribers and keep watching. Thank you. The materials for today's project are 4mm fire polish beads, and these are vitriol. The color is vitriol. You can use any 4mm bead. You can use a round, a druck, pearl. I don't suggest using a bicone because when I made my prototype, the bicone base becomes pretty uncomfortable when you wear it, so I don't suggest you use bicones for your base. And this is what we're using the fire polish beads for the base. I'm using 3mm Bicone crystals. These are Swarovski Argent Light. These will be on the sides of the base, so we're going to need quite a few of them. We're going to use 4mm Bicone crystals. These are Swarovski in the Argent Light color. We need one. I'm using a lobster claw. This is my 14mm swivel bottom lobster claw. I'm using a 10mm twisted jump ring, and these are stainless steel. I'm also using 2 wire guardians, which are also stainless steel. Also, I'm using 1 beading needle, my nippers, an 8-pound fire line, and I'm using the crystal color in my 8-pound fire line. I'm using my bead board, and I have gray colored bead mat on top of my bead board to help to see the colors a little better. I'm not sure about this base for seeing these colors, but this one is pretty, it was better for me to see through the camera. And if you like the project that you saw in the introduction, please stick around and we will get started making our project. I threaded my needle with 2 yards of my fire line, and I'm going to begin the project by attaching my bicone, my 3mm bicone, to my lobster claw. So I strung on my 3mm bicone, and as a matter of fact, we don't need the 4mm bicones right now. We're going to be making the base with the 4mm fire polish and the 3mm bicones. So I'm going to put these over this way for easy access. So I strung on 1 3mm bicone, and I'm going to pull my thread down, and I'm going to string on my wire guardian, pass my needle into the one side and back down into the other side, and pull my thread as far down as I want to pull it. I don't need much of a tail thread because the only thing I'm going to do is tie a knot and cut that off. While I'm here, I'm going to string on my lobster claw and let that rest in the groove of the wire guardian, rest in the horseshoe of the wire guardian. Because the groove of the wire guardian is on the outside of it where the thread rests. I keep saying the wrong thing. So the thread rests in the groove and the clasp rests in the horseshoe. Now, while I'm here, I'm going to pass my needle back into this 3mm bicone and pull my thread. And this is what we have. Normally, I squeeze these wire guardians, but I'm not using Bicone. I'm not using seed beads in this project. So I'm just going to pull this here just like this. And this is our first unit, the one that has the clasping on it. And what I'm going to do now is reinforce this unit by passing my needle back into the wire guardian and through the lobster claw, through the loop in the lobster claw, and back down on this side of the wire guardian, and I'm just holding on to this so it doesn't come out of formation. And once I'm here, I'm going to tie my threads into a knot, one knot, and then when I make my second loop, I pass my tail thread back into that loop twice, and I just pull down on it really tightly. And I want to be careful not to pull the knot into that bicone, because I have to go back into this bicone another time. But right now I'm just going to pass through here and get into position to make my first crystal unit. So to make that first crystal unit, I'm going to string on a 3mm bicone, a 4mm fire polish, and a 3mm bicone. I'm going to pass my needle back into this side of that 3mm bicone, and I'm going to advance my needle into this. I turned it so that I could work on my right side, so I advanced my needle through this bicone and into the fire polish. And now I'm going to continue making units the same exact way. String on a 3mm bicone, 4mm fire polish, and a 3mm bicone. Pass my needle back into that 4mm fire polish where we're exiting in the opposite side, and pull. I'm going to flip this over so that I can work on my right side, and I'm going to advance my needle into this bicone bead on the side and reposition into my 4mm fire polish. And this is how you're going to make your units. You're going to continue doing that until you have an even number of units, and we will get together after I get my even number of units done. I completed my even number of units, and for me this is 30 units. And now we're going to just add our last unit by stringing on, and we're just using the 3mm bicone, so I'm going to string on 3 of my 3mm bicone beads, pass my needle back into this 4mm fire polish bead here, and get into position to add my wire guardian and the other side of my clasp. I'm going to reinforce this unit on the way back, but right now I'm going to string on my wire guardian, pass my needle into the first side and around the groove to make sure that my thread is resting in there, and I'm going to add my jump ring. And you could always use a plier to add your jump ring at the end, but I'm just going to do that while I'm here. And I'm going to pass my needle back into this 3mm bicone. Oh, well, that was cute. Well, I guess I didn't have my jump ring closed, and that can happen. It slipped through my thread, so my opening is here. Yep, the thread slipped through the jump ring, but when you use a wire guardian, that cannot happen. So let's go again. Just gonna put that in there, and I'm gonna pass my needle back into the opposite side of this top bicone, and I'm gonna pull the thread there. And of course, I got my needle stuck, caught on my beadboard. Alright, let's see. I'm just going to hold on to it so that it doesn't move. Okay. Alright. Now, while I'm here, I'm going to go back around my wire guardian so I can reinforce. So I'm going to go back into the first side where we started. And make sure that we got that pulled down and around the groove between the jump ring. And I'm going to go back into this 3mm fire polish here. And this time get my thread caught on my pliers. Excuse me. And now the second part of our clasping is complete. I'm going to go here now. I'm going to reinforce. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to turn it this way. I'm going to reinforce this this last unit that I added because I didn't do that before, just by passing my needle through the bicone, the 4mm fire polish, the side bicone, and the top bicone again. And that's the reinforcement that's done. And of course, I got my thread caught in there. Okay, I'm going to back this out. Sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. Backing my thread out with the needle attached. Well, I'm going to take my needle off. That's the best way to do it anyway. And get my thread out of that jump ring where it does not belong. That's because I got it through that hole again. And okay. Okay, let's just try this again. Back into the bicone. This time I'm going to make sure that the thread doesn't get in there. Now we're going to get into position to do add our embellishment units. I'm going to advance my needle into this 4mm fire polish, and we're done with the fire polish beads for the project. So I put those away, and we're going to reposition by advancing our needle into this bicone, the second one, not the first. We're going to make our embellishments starting at the second bicone on the side. I'm going to make additional units as follows. going to string on three of my 3mm bicones. I'm going to pass the needle back into the opposite side of the bicone that I'm exiting, and I'm going to reinforce this unit. And then I'm going to advance my needle into this fire polish bead here, my crossover bead, and I'm going to advance my needle into this 3mm fire polish, 3mm bicone that corresponds with the one on the other side of these two fire polish beads. So I'm going to just advance my needle up there. I'm going to add an additional unit by stringing on 3 of my 3mm bicones. I'm going to pass my needle back into this side, the opposite side of that 3mm bicone, and I'm going to reinforce the unit. And this is really important to do. And after reinforcing the unit, then I need to position myself by advancing into this 3mm bicone and into this 3mm bicone that's on the right side. Now I'm going to use my 4mm bicones. I'm going to string on one of my 4mm bicones, and I'm going to pass my needle into this corresponding 3mm bicone in the half circle. So I'm coming out in the down position. I need to go into this bicone in the up position, and I'm going to string on the other 4mm bicone, and I'm going to come back over to the one where the 3mm bicone where we started and pass it down, completing the circle. Once you do that, you have to reinforce this unit. So we're just going to go into the 4mm bicone, 3mm bicone, 4mm bicone, 3mm bicone, and then we are going to continue advancing our needle this way down into this side 3mm bicone here, into the 4mm fire polish on the bottom. I'm going to flip it around this way. You can see that my thread is exiting this 4mm fire polish down here. I'm going excuse me, I'm going to advance into this 3mm bicone. Excuse me again. Into this 4mm fire polish bead, and into this 3mm bicone. And this is where we're going to continue our units. So as you can see, my thread is exiting this down position. I'm going to string on 3 of my 3mm Bicone crystals, and I'm going to pass my needle back into the same crystal that I'm exiting in the opposite direction to make that unit. To make the unit. And don't forget, you have to reinforce this unit. You can't worry about that if it pulls apart, because we'll get it back together by tightening up the thread. Now I'm going to advance my needle after I get caught. advance my needle into this 4mm fire polish bead and up into the 3mm bicone that corresponds with the one on this side that's rests between these two 4mm bicones, and I'm going to make my unit. I'm going to string on 3 of my 3mm bicones and pass my needle back into the opposite side here, and I'm going to reinforce this unit by passing my needle into each of these bicones. And I'm completing this reinforcement by going into this 3mm Bicone crystal, and then I have to position myself to add the 4mm. So I'm going up this way, and now to the outside. And don't get nervous if you see me flipping these around. It's just because I'm trying to work on my right side. It's more comfortable that way, and I think I can show you easier. Now that I'm here, I'm going to string on a 4mm bicone and enter my needle into the corresponding outside 3mm bicone on this side, and string on my other 4mm bicone and complete the circle by going into the outside 3mm bicone where we started. So now it's just a matter of reinforcing this unit and I'm just turning it around so that I can work on my right side. So now I have completed reinforcing the unit, and now that I'm here on the side, I'm going to pass my needle down into the 3mm, oh my goodness, down into this 3mm bicone here on the side and into the 4mm fire polish there. Now I'm going to turn it so that you can see the top. You can see my thread is exiting this 4mm fire polish here. I'm going to advance my needle into the next 3mm bicone, into the next 4mm fire polish, and into the next 3mm bicone. And this is how we're going to begin this one, and that's the same way that I began when we did the first one up here. So you'll do every other one is going to be like every other unit is going to be like the first one, and this one started differently. Every other unit after that is going to be this one. So if you get confused, just rewind me back to the point where we start with our first embellishment, and you'll be able to see completely how we make these units and embellishments. And we're going to go all the way until we get to the second unit from the top. This unit right here, this is going to be our last embellishment unit. Every other unit is going to be embellished. So I will see you when you get there. I have completed adding my embellishment units, my floral clusters, and this is what we have. I cut off all of my threads, and this happens to be a cute bracelet. Now, if you are confused about the whereabouts of the first video that I did for this project, This is a redo because I made it simpler, and the project went a lot faster. And so this is the bracelet that I made in the previous video. It's the same thing, except now I used 4mm and 3mm fire polish beads on the base and sides of the gold one. For this silver, I used 4mm fire polish and 3mm bicones for the base and sides, and I needed to use a lot more, so this was 28 full units, which was ended up being 29, and this was 30, which ended up being 31, and they're about the same. And this is the one that I did with pearls. I used the Swarovski pearl mix, and I used 4mm pearls and 3mm pearls for the base and the side, the base I mean, but I used 4mm pearls for the sides, and I ran out of pearls, and I put 4 units of crystals in the center, and this was also 29 units. And then this is the one that I made, another one that I made with 4mm and 3mm fire polish beads that was 28 units, 29 units, but it's long enough for me not to have to put a jump ring on the end, and I'm not using seed beads in this project at all. So if you like the variations, you can do anything you want to do with regards to your sizing, but I suggest that you don't use bicones for the bottom because they are pretty uncomfortable against the skin. Well, they're uncomfortable against my skin. So I'd like to thank you for hanging out with me, and hopefully I will see you next time. So long.